Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 41. Recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. But before we get into that, of course, our most important thing is to say hi to Jamie. What is happening with you, sister?
Nothing much, Paige. Good to be here. How are you?
Good. It's just always fun to get together and chat about these topics that are so important to our hearts. So, that
Yes.
being said, I'm going to start out by telling a story about you, by the way.
Okay.
Um, on this topic of recovery is a marathon, not a sprint, there have been several times when Jamie and I have been in discussions on different topics.
Mhm.
And as hard as it is to believe, I can be wound a little tight from time to time. And I'm always thinking 10 steps down the road. And I bet she has had to say to me at least 5 times, Paige, you just have to stop and play the long game. So after I do the eye roll, I understand that this is probably true. And she's very wise in that aspect. But I was thinking this really applies to every area of life, right? Especially recovery. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, why do you think it's better to take the slow, consistent, steady approach? By the way, isn't fast better? Wouldn't you just get quicker results whenever you go as fast as you can?
Yeah, good question.
Every time I do the extreme when it comes to dieting or rushing, it comes back to haunt me. The big extreme changes never seem to have staying power. I work with so many people who start out with extreme. They're gung ho the first week, then they have to work on staying motivated by the second week. And honestly, by the third week, they're always completely off the wagon. The wheels have come off the bus, and we're just trying to catch up and start over again. So not only that have I learned that way, but I've learned through exercise, through lifting weights and running. I have ended up getting injured or sidelined every time I tried to push it. And then I'm fighting off an injury for 6 months, the next 6 months, and it's miserable. So
Mhm.
I have really learned as I have aged, especially, I could get away with more when I was younger. My body was a little more forgiving, but as I've aged, consistently steady pace is best for long-term results for me. That hardcore exercise, it's a young man's game, man. What
Yeah,
about you?
yeah. Uh, well, so I think a lot about these words, and I use when I hear this phrase, because of course, like you, I've heard this phrase 100 times over the course of my life and about different things. And this whole idea of recovery being a marathon, not a sprint, I used to think about it as long or short, right? But
Ah,
it really, like, saying recovery is not a short burst of extreme energy. It's a long, planful, intentional. You build upon it. You have to strategize for it. That's how you run a marathon. And it's
mhm.
the same way with recovery. So anyone could come in to run a sprint. Anyone could walk in, put their running shoes on, do a few hamstring stretches and go, right? Anyone can do that. And then they would find that they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they or maybe didn't know how out of shape they were. And they probably, if somebody asked them, can you do that again tomorrow? They'd be like, no. I don't want to do that again tomorrow. That was really hard because I wasn't prepared. I didn't strategize.
Mhm.
I don't have the right training in place for this. I just kind of came in and thought, well, anyone could do this. It's the same thing with, dieting versus recovery. So when I think about recovery, it does take planning, it takes strategy, it takes thought, and it takes building up to your long-term goals along the way.
You
So these
know,
short little goals give you long-term results.
when you were talking about that, it made me think about how is that where people the real struggle is with just consistently hanging in there for long-term results versus we want immediate gratification in this society?
It could be, but then the problem is they set themselves up for failure unknowingly because they're setting themselves up for them to not be able to consistently keep the results that they get
Mhm.
because it's not sustainable. So that's one word that came to me in my recovery the last 5 years. Is this sustainable?
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that more.
Yeah. So do you find going hard in recovery sets you up for lapsing, Paige?
Oh my gosh. Yes, 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 yes. My stress skyrockets. It really sets you up for that increased hangry hunger.
Yep. Hangriness. Yeah.
Yeah, it turns on that food seeking part for me of the brain. And I have found that a calm brain doesn't crave, and the extreme does not invite calm. It just works against me every time that I'm doing something wacky like that. Ironically, as a side note regarding lapsing, when we interviewed Chef AJ a while back,
Mhm.
we asked her about those that can't get off that binge restrict cycle and what her advice
Right.
was. And she had said something wonderful that I had never thought of before, which is so obvious. But she said her biggest piece of advice was stop restricting.
Right.
Again, this is that marathon component. And
Yeah.
restricting, as you just said, it's not sustainable. And it's definitely not recovery in action.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't, well said by you and by Chef AJ. And for me, yeah, going hard sets me up for a lapse of some kind, because it's just, again, not sustainable. And for me, when I think about my old binge restrict cycles, when I'm in or tempted to be in a cycle like that, again, in anything, any aspect of my life, not just food, I will often find myself saying, there's really, like, how can I allow myself freedom in an area that won't harm me? So
Mm.
the food, it's okay. I'm not going to restrict anything with the food, but I'm going to make sure that the food that I do eat is whole and unprocessed and nutrient dense, and my body knows what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find that it takes care of itself. I don't need to worry about any kind of measurement or restriction, because my body takes care of itself.
Yeah.
And I also eat sequentially to make sure that my body gets what it needs nutrient wise first. And then it gets full at the end of the meal with some of those less nutrient dense, maybe more calorically dense foods, like those, starches or fruits or things like that, that don't have quite as many nutrients as some of the other foods I eat.
So smart. I love that. I've heard of that before. Is there a name to that where you just start out with
Yeah,
the
food sequencing, meal sequencing.
yeah,
Mhm.
smart. Have you heard that that leads into my next question about have you heard about all these diet companies that promote, lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks? Everybody knows that's not real, right? So I'm talking to Jamie, but I'm also talking about to everybody else that's
Yeah,
listening. You do know that's not real, right?
yeah.
And I know for myself because I've done every one of those stupid programs. I relied on willpower till I didn't, and
Mhm.
everything came right back and more every single time. What do you know? They never actually worked, and
Yep.
they're not interested in giving you your money back either. So such liars. So
Yeah,
it's just not sustainable. That word will keep coming up as we're talking today. It's just not a sustainable way to do things. And it sets you up for depression and failure. It's a no-win game in that fast and fury approach with over promises. I can't stand that when people overpromise things.
yeah, yeah.
I've
Well,
heard you talk about that. I never overpromise.
oh, I under promise and over deliver.
Okay, yeah, I knew. Sorry, yeah,
Set expectations appropriately.
yeah.
That helps me. But yeah, marketers don't do that. It seems like not all, but
It
in the
doesn't
diet
sell.
industry, a lot of them don't. Um, and I know they're not real, right? I know these claims aren't real, but I got sucked into them. And I also know that whenever I would try something, when I realized I needed to stop, it was because my body was telling me, hey, whatever you're doing is not sustainable.
Mm.
It's not sustainable over the long term. So there was no way that my body could have kept those changes going, or those habits going, because they're not meant to for the long term.
Mhm. Don't you think they're trying to just tap into your fear too? What they're selling you is fear,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You've got to
Fear
lose.
and lack.
Yeah, fear and lack, and you've got to lose this weight, or you're not going to be socially accepted. You're not going to have friends. You're not going to be happy. You're not
Yep.
going to be good in your
Not
bikini.
gonna be in a loving family or a loving
Yeah.
partnership. Yeah,
Uh, They're going to
all of it.
tap into that weakest part of our human existence, which is to be a part of, you fill in the blank, whatever that part of something, you're going to be outcast unless you get these 20 pounds off in these 2 weeks.
Exactly. Exactly. So can you imagine how much money you would have back in your bank account if you added all of those quick fix schemes? And isn't it interesting that the sprint tactics actually take longer to heal from? It sets us back every time. How much money, Paige, would you calculate?
I don't know. I don't know if the calculator goes that big, but obviously if you're calculating the total cost of not just money, but emotional pain and suffering,
Yeah.
a gazillion,
Yeah.
billion, whatever, dollars or emotions or feelings, but it pains
Yeah.
me to think about it every time. I've even bought clothes a size smaller thinking that that would be the motivation I needed. But yes, every time I hurried, I got further behind. And by the way, what woman hasn't bought a smaller size thinking that that would motivate them into thin, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I was on the opposite side of the spectrum. So now I might be tempted to not buy a smaller size, but buy a size that might fit snug because, oh, well, I think, well, I'll lose weight and get into it. Right. Or it'll look better on me when I
Huh?
lose weight. And I'm guilty of that now. But when I was on the other side of the spectrum and morbidly obese, I would um end up not even thinking about sizes. I would just buy stuff that didn't have sizes associated, or it was just general. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And a lot of elastic because I didn't want to think about things not fitting. It just wasn't in comfort because I was so uncomfortable in my body. And not just because of how I looked, but I literally was so uncomfortable living in my body, leaning forward and back and doing anything physical and walking and breathing and talking. All of it was uncomfortable. So the
Mhm.
idea to have that discomfort and then clothing on top of it was just horrible.
Yeah.
um
So glad
so
that you.
I have the same approach.
Yeah. So this approach really does set you up for a string of lapsing or binge
Mhm.
cycles. So when we have a lapse, we do know that lapsing is normal as we're in the recovery process. We
Mhm.
need to talk about the best way to bounce back from a lap. And for me, I don't know about you, but I just try to get right back up on the horse. I usually have to sleep it off and start fresh the next day. I understand that once the train has left the station, it is hard for me to reel it back in that day, but lots of water, very clean food. But generally, I'm able to bounce right back to routine after an off day or vacation. And believe me, I am so miserable that I want to give my tummy a break. It hurts. It
Yeah.
physically hurts. It emotionally hurts. It everything. Life has a dark cloud hanging over it. It's the worst. It's a dark place for me, but I just that in and of itself motivates me to clean up my act and go, I don't want to live this way. I don't want to be in
Agreed.
this dark place.
Agreed. Yeah. Same mindset for me. And I will start if I now if it's the middle of the day or earlier in the day and I've taken a turn I don't want to take, I'm on that next meal. But let's say, it's in the evening, then I
Yeah.
say, okay, we're closing up shop tonight, and then tomorrow we're gonna hit the ground in a different way. And I spend a lot of time doing some, writing or inner family work or both sometimes to connect with myself in those parts of me that
Mhm.
need some love and attention. And I really appreciate that time that I spend doing that because I'm always better the next day and
Mhm.
remind myself of my why again when I'm getting out there and getting back on the horse. And I find that gentle approach really helps me instead of beating myself up or berating myself.
You gave some advice to someone that I had been working with that was struggling with a lapse and how to get out of it. And I just remember one key. I'm taking a right turn a little bit, but this was so important. You said one key when you're in the middle of a lapse, change your environment,
Yeah.
move, move, just move,
Yeah.
get away from where you are. It
Yes.
doesn't
Change
matter
your
where.
room, get out of
Yeah.
your house,
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
I would hesitate to say go for a drive if you're earlier in recovery, because you might find that you're driving right through a fast food place or a
Right.
convenience store.
Mhm.
So maybe don't drive, but get outside in nature, call someone that you trust, call someone that again, you have to tell them what you're dealing with, but just call just to get out of self.
I'm going to tell a little bit more about your advice with that because it was so profound for people that when they have lapses,
Mhm.
some people tendency to have several day lapse. You said the first when it's happening, try to change your environment. The next day, if you're still in it, eat as much clean food as you want. Don't put parameters on that. And
Exactly.
then the next day, start working on volume control with the clean eating. But it was just a nice, more gentle stair stepping your way out of it. So anyway, I digressed, but that was important enough that I wanted to share that. And I
Thank
loved
you.
your wisdom with that.
Thank you. So do you think, depending, if we go fast or slow, do you think you ever arrive in recovery?
Oh my gosh,
A
I
myth?
just love this. Is it a myth? I don't know. I love this topic so much. This question, this discussion area, it's so great because for me, it's a firm no. And quite frankly, I wouldn't ever want to feel like I had arrived because my defense
Exactly.
would be down. I like to think I'm better as the years go by. I certainly can see a difference in me after being off sugar for 1 year. Now, that first year really sucked. It was hard. It
Mhm.
was not that fun. And the cravings still would rear their ugly head from time to time. But during that time period, they became more manageable, further apart, less intense, more able to. I was able to just let them kind of glide by. But if we went out to dinner, I'd have to go into the bathroom when the others were eating dessert. If I was on vacation, it was a struggle. But guess what? I hung in there and it did get easier. Now it doesn't even bother me if people eat dessert right in front of me at family gatherings or whatever. I'm almost muted to it. There's just really no I'm almost blanked out. It just does not affect me at all. Sugar is such a hard line for me. And
Mm.
quite frankly, my desire has changed. So that's one thing that in recovery is your taste buds change, your
Yes,
desires change, your
that's
neural
right.
pathways change. But
Mhm.
it's such a dark place with those sugar binges that I don't even want to go there. I was talking about Chef AJ a little bit earlier. She says she's been in recovery for 20 years. But it took her 10 years before she could go to restaurants. And now, after 20 years, she's even stronger with things. But she admits that you never have recovered. And anyone who gets too cavalier can really end up in a lot of trouble.
That's right.
I've heard of doctors talking about working with long-term alcoholics. And once they recover, some of them can work in bars without any
Yeah.
problem. But I always thought, my question is, why would you want to? Why would you ever even want
Oh,
to go?
I always have the same thought. It'd be like me going to work in a fast food restaurant
Yeah,
or some
that's
kind of
that's
any
what
restaurant. Any restaurant.
I can't picture myself working in a bakery, but what I do know is I can pass by one now without trouble. But why would I ever want to see the sights, the sounds, the smell, all that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my answer is no, we've never really
I
arrived.
I agree. Life recovery is a lifelong skill that needs to be practiced, never perfected, and we are never done. If we think about the fact that we have a finish line, that is
Danger.
yeah, absolutely. There really is no finish line.
And that begs the next question that if we recovered quickly, think about all the lessons that we would be missing out on from a speedy process. So I think that's a good reframe to people
Yeah,
that are wanting to race through recovery. You're missing out on a lot of beautiful life lessons, hard lessons, but those are the ones we learn from,
that's
right?
right.
One of the biggest payoffs is learning what you're made of, that you can do hard things. The pride and confidence that slow and steady truly does win the race. I went on this big vacation about 5 months after going sugar free. I was a nervous wreck, as you can well imagine. I made this sign that said sugar free vacation, and I was in a recovery group at that time. And I wrote everyone's name on it and folded it up and put it in my pocket over my heart and said, everybody, you're going with me. And that's back when that vacation was when I was climbing Pikes Peak for my birthday, and climbed up that 14,000-foot mountain. And at the top, I took this picture with all these
I
people that
remember.
were with me who did that journey with me, and put it back on our Facebook site so everyone can see that they climbed this mountain, and they did it sugar free, and we did it as a group. And each day after that, I would take a picture from whatever we were doing and post it back to my Facebook group, and
Yep.
show everybody that I was sticking to my plan. I didn't put any other restrictions on myself during that time. I had the bandwidth to focus on staying off sugar. That took everything I had, but I did it. And guess what? The second year when I went, I didn't need a sign that year. I didn't stuff myself out of anxiety on the car ride there or back. My anxiety that first year was off the charts, and I felt that nervous hunger
Right.
continually. But the second year, my focus was to do better in the car, which I learned to do with podcasts like Real Food Recovery. That makes the time go very fast and
Yep.
enjoyable, and some Netflix, and it was just perfect. And I
Yeah.
just now finished my third year, and guess what? The car ride was a breeze. In fact, it went fast, and it's nice to see the progress. We know that addiction is progressive, but
Yes.
fortunately, we also get to see that recovery is progressive as well. So yay
Absolutely.
me. Yay
Absolutely.
me.
And also, you'd be missing if recovery was a quick process. We, not just you, we would be missing, those aha moments and those things that we really can celebrate. Those wins that we do have, the small wins or the big wins that we do have. That's the kind of stuff that you want to cherish. It keeps you going.
I agree.
And if you go too fast, you miss it all because you're focused on this end goal that frankly is a moving target.
Oh, that's well said there. And you know what? What an example to other people too, that it can be done. It goes back to our conversation when we started out in the beginning about the sustainability, and why do most people not run marathons? I mean, it's hard, consistent work to
Mhm.
get there. And I think we have a society of immediate gratification, which is a big
Absolutely.
problem too. So
Yes. Don't even
what do
get me
you have to
started.
say? Why do you think? What would you miss?
Oh, I would miss a ton. I think I'd miss all of the ways that I was being successful, the ways that I was learning and growing. And I think that would just set me back because I'd be so focused on the outcome. I wouldn't care about the process. And that is the recipe for going off plan, going off the rails, going off of my food plan.
Yeah.
Why do you think, we Paige, we know that there are many inpatient treatment facilities across the country, probably across the world, for food addicts. And we've seen some pretty abysmal return rates,
Yeah.
within the first 6 months following
Yeah.
discharge or following, their separation from that home. What and why do you think the 30-day inpatient treatment plans and programs don't work long term?
Yeah, my biggest concern with food addiction recovery programs is that if you're out of your environment,
Mhm.
you are crippled to real life when you come home.
Yeah.
I really do believe in in-home programs. Rushing recovery is a setup for disaster. Again, with selling the short-term gimmicks, achieving lifelong sobriety, it's a lifelong process. Life
Yes.
throws us so many curveballs. You really have to be living your life in that normal environment to build up those recovery muscles for so many different situations. It really helps you to be prepared and confident to take on the day if you recover while living your normal life. I had this girlfriend when we were teenagers, and she was very affluent, and each summer she struggled with her weight. I'm going to say a word that this is not my word, but they would send her off to fat camp. I'm putting in air quotes for those that
Mhm.
can't say me. Again, I'm not saying that word. That was just how it was
Yeah.
referenced at that.
Reference.
That's honestly what they called it back
Yeah.
then.
Oh
And of
yeah.
course, she every year she would come back and she would gain everything she had lost and more. And it's the same with a few other people. I know it just doesn't work.
Mhm.
That's why our online food addiction recovery community at Real Food Recovery has been so successful. Everyone is recovering in their normal environment, and I mean, everyone's doing well. we have this huge group support that we stay connected to one another. We know connection is a
Amazing.
huge impact on recovery. So that's why I think they don't work. Don't what's that show? Biggest Loser or
Yeah,
something like that? What's the statistics for those people that have been there and
I think one or two out of the dozens that were on there.
yeah, that have kept the weight off?
Yeah,
And that's so sad. That's such a setup for major depression afterwards.
absolutely.
If anything more depressing. Have you known people that have lost let's say 100 pounds and gained it back
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and then lost it again and gained it back? I
Probably
mean,
a handful.
I've known someone who's done that, a couple people that have done that, but I can't think of anything more depressing than that.
Well, and they're always walking into rooms or family situations. Even I do, right? Where, they're looking at you. Is she going to gain it back? Is she going to gain it back? And it's been like 15 years and they're like,
You can
wait,
feel the eyeballs on you.
for sure. For
Oh,
sure. The natural annual weight fluctuations that happen with the seasons for me, in the wintertime I'll gain about 5 pounds, in the summertime I'll lose it, and it's just cyclical. It's what happens for me, especially living in the Northeast. Didn't happen in the warmer climates, but living in the Northeast, that's just what happens.
mhm.
And I will notice that people are like watching what I eat or watching what I do. Family members are watching what I do. And it's so interesting because it's been so long, yet I'll still get comments at family events like, "Oh, you're still looking good." It's like,
Oh my gosh. I know they mean well.
how about how's life, or how's work, or what's going on, or, what are you into for fun, or how's your husband? None of those things, none of those
Yeah,
questions.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it's too
So
bad.
what's your thoughts around the in-home
It
or
really, it takes you out of the real world and puts you in a controlled environment that's not real or sustainable. It's
mm,
what it comes down to. Inpatient centers for food addiction treatment set patients up for failure once they get back into the real world, unless they focus on a specific intervention or modality like water fasting, which
mhm,
needs to be done in a controlled environment. That's different. But
mhm,
anything that doesn't really need to be done in a controlled environment, that could be done in the home, should be taught in the home.
mhm.
Should not
Agree.
be taught in a controlled environment.
Yeah, I agree so much. I agree. Unless you want to live in that inpatient facility till the day you die,
Right.
it's probably not in your best interest. So, anyway, so this is another topic that I think is interesting to talk about when it comes to people that have been successful. Do you feel like you have to have competition with someone that's been successful, or are you comparing your recovery journey with someone else? And so then you want to ask, is it really that bad? Is it motivating when other people are successful, or is it harmful to you? So I think this is such an interesting topic because I've heard others say that it's depressing to hear how well others are doing and it drives them to the food out of depression. So that's one way to think about it.
True.
And I certainly understand it's hard to see people doing so well when you're struggling. I get that. I'm not diminishing that point. But the other line of thinking is that it can be motivating to see that it is possible and to not lose hope.
Right.
Uh, Jamie and I have talked about she's comfortable going out to dinner and on vacation. I'm not great at that yet. And so I understand I still have work to do in that area. So I could feel bad about myself that
Mm-hmm.
she does well in those environments. And I really struggle with overeating and cravings and things like that in those environments. Or I could take the attitude of, lady, teach me your ways. And I want to grow from her wisdom. And instead of saying, poor me, I'm going to ask her questions
Right.
about what are the secrets of how do you handle those situations. And she always reminds me that she's been doing this a lot longer than me. So that does give me hope that I'm going to be there where she is someday. And that's the kind of piece we work on at Real Food Recovery. We help people handle these types of big
Yeah.
events and learn to stay food neutral.
Yeah.
I mean, all of our meetings all day long, we're giving people advice with how to deal with these everyday problems.
Yeah. Comparison is the thief of joy. I just remind myself that whenever I get caught in that, I'm human. I get caught up in that for a moment or for maybe half a day with someone or something. And then I'm like, wait a
Mhm.
second. Really, comparison really is the thief of joy. and there's no reason for me to spend my energy comparing myself. That's not my journey. If I was supposed to be on that journey, I would be in their body, but I'm not.
Yeah.
So that's not what God's will is for me. So I have to remind myself of that.
Mm.
So in our industry, we hear so many say, I'd love for the cravings to stop, but I don't know if I can live with them long term. I understand this is a long game, but how can we speed up getting over cravings?
Yes. Yeah. Let's go. Come on. Let's get
Yeah.
over. So
I know it's a long game, but I want a short game. Come
yeah,
on.
I know. Well, during this long game, I'd like to make it shorter.
Yeah,
How do we
yeah,
do that? So
exactly. Is there a
I
shortcut to this
understand.
long game?
Say that again.
Is there a shortcut to this long game?
We definitely need that cross stitched on something. That's awesome. I understand that cravings they can make us crazy, right? It's such a distraction. It's just like a little fly buzzing around your head that won't go away. But the good news is we can get through that hard sugar detox in really 3 to 5 days. And then it keeps getting better the longer we're off. We're told in recovery that we're trying to rewire these neural pathways, and that happens with changing our habits and our thinking. That's the marathon component of the equation. So, in essence, the sugar detox can be considered this intense sprint, but the marathon is the rewiring that takes place over long-term habit stacking, and it just gets better. Everyone that's listening, please just know it gets better and better and better, and life just invites more and more joy the longer that we hang in there and do it. The rewards are so worth it. We talk a lot about we do what we do for how we feel after. Trust me, it's all worth it.
Yeah. And I would say the answer to that question, I'd say is, how can we speed up that cravings, overcoming cravings? I would say, just curiosity, compassion, and finding ways to give yourself an outlet other than food.
Yeah, I love that. You've talked about that a lot, about just looking at it with curiosity and compassion, and how that changes the focus from the craving to just, I've got this situation here and let's take a look.
Exactly.
How can I
Yeah.
solve that kindly with myself? So smart,
Mhm.
so helpful. So, we always hear that you have to make recovery your number one priority. And it brings up the question of, will that always be the case? Will I always have to make recovery my number one priority? Well, quite frankly, yes. Yes, you will. It's always going to take work. And if you are not your best, you really have nothing to offer anyone else. So that's definitely where the phrase recovery is a marathon comes from,
Yeah.
whether it's meditation, prayer, food prep, sleep, exercise, stress management, breathing exercise. It all has to be our first concern. And in Real Food Recovery, we have these branches of recovery that we talk about, and all these different facets of our recovery, we give them attention, so that we talk about if we want to make recovery our number one priority, yes, it is. But what that looks like over the years will change.
Exactly.
It gets better. You're working with your body, not against your body. It becomes this beautiful dance, and it just becomes such a joy. It's
Yeah.
actually a
Very fulfilling.
joy to be where we are versus white knuckling or stress or anything like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. Do you think there will always be challenges in recovery?
Probably. I mean, that's just life, right? That's how life goes. But during this marathon, you're going to be strengthening your recovery muscles and be better prepared to then take on whatever comes your way, because you build up the skills. And so your automatic default systems just start kicking into place, and you're much better prepared.
Agreed.
What do you think?
Yeah, yes, of course, but hopefully if we practice recovery skills, we'll get better at overcoming these challenges. And just last night, my husband called, and one of the members of the family is having some growing pains, and they're away at school, and they called my husband, and we're lamenting about how hard things are, and it's just hard, and it's not fun anymore. And my husband's telling me this, and
Really?
we laughed, not to the person, but we laughed, and we're like,
Mhm.
welcome to adulthood, welcome to
Sure.
real life. It's
Adult.
not exactly, it's not always fun. It is very hard sometimes, and you just have to keep going. You just have to pick yourself up and keep going, and looking to life to be fun and interesting all the time. You will be let down, or you will be an addict because you're trying to manufacture it with substances outside of you or things outside of you, which is what a lot of people, myself included, do or did, and it always leads to a dead end.
Yeah.
So embrace the suck.
Yeah, if you talk about from a spirituality practice, being devoted to spirituality and the things that it takes to feel that connection to whatever your higher power is, it takes work, but it's just the better way to go. It's the same with recovery. It takes work, but
Choose your heart.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. Choose your hard. It's hard to do your homework, but it's a lot harder to fail a test.
Yeah.
So that's what, yeah, well said. That I'll leave it there with choose your hard. So that is our big discussion around why we believe that recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. And we have a couple listener questions that I think really good. I guess I'll go ahead and take the first one, and you can take the second one. You want to do it that way?
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is, I hear people saying that it takes a long time to recover from processed food addiction, but really, how long? I'd like to start my timer. So I had to laugh at that because join the club. Everybody does want to say, okay, but how long?
Yeah.
So everyone's different. Every journey is different. We all face different sets of challenges. And the biggest setup for disaster is to actually use a timer. Get rid of the time. I got rid of the scale because I was tired of that data that meant nothing and it was controlling me. So just start living your life the best you can, one meal at a time. But that stress keeps the addiction alive. It keeps cortisol running through your bloodstream. It will work against you if you're trying to lose weight. So just relax into the process
and enjoy the ride.
Jamie told time about with the losing weight, just focus on the next meal.
Exactly.
So I cut you off. Sorry.
No, I was going to read the second question. I keep hearing that recovery takes a long time, but how do you measure if it is working? Do you measure by losing weight? So initially I did measure that way. And I measured by clothing size or by people's comments or by, I mean, all different ways. It was always things outside of me.
Right.
But what I realized is now, and Paige, I agree with what you say is it's about experiencing a calm brain. The most joyful state of being really is just that calm. You're not worried, you're not regretful, you're not pensive, you're just peaceful, and you're connected with a higher power or a spiritual presence in the universe. So while weight loss is definitely a bonus, I understand the desire to see progress in that direction, right? We all do. We have found that it's easier to lose weight if your brain can be peaceful because you've sort of achieved a place of peace along the way, and the brain thing is not required as much to our thinking and overthinking about the situation, weight or other measurements can derail us and set us back. So if we find that it's easier when our thinking is peaceful, when our mindsets are sort of focused and centered, we're not really getting caught up in outcomes. We're just enjoying the process is really the best way to say that.
I was having a conversation with one of our members at Real Food Recovery today, and we were talking about waking up in the morning with no regrets. For this person is struggling with some nighttime eating issues, and if we think about the future me and know that I'm going to be so happy tomorrow morning when I wake up, and I don't give into this fear of deprivation, which really you're not hungry, you've just got this anxiety and fear that you're drumming up in your head. And what can we say to that fear to calm it down? What does it really need? So going to bed without regrets and waking up without regrets is a great measuring tool to see that you're progressing in recovery.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. This was a wonderful episode. I love this topic, and I know it's so familiar to so many people. But if you want to know more about our community, you can find our website at www.realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number
Yes.
4 and the letter U. We are having a great time there and having all kinds of success for our members, and we would love to see you there with us too.
Yeah. It's
Meantime,
amazing. Amazing
thanks,
place.
guys. See you later.
Thank you. Thanks, Paige.